Chapter 953, Is This the Source of God? Boone was very smart. He understood that on this battlefield, fighting was the business of top-level aliens. The low-level aliens, or reconnaissance troops, were only responsible for auxiliary work, not participating in the core battle. Since they were going to hunt down a sniper whose intelligence was unknown, it would be useless to bring too many team members. So, he only brought his adjutant, and then, according to Horn's instructions, began to return in the direction they came from. This was a hunt in the poisonous miasma. Without the assistance of precise instruments, it was unknown how long it would take to find Jangi. But as a professional soldier, he had plenty of patience. Boone's men saluted him respectfully, and then watched Boone and Magrian leave and disappear in the thick poisonous miasma. Jangi hunted down 2 alien teams, but for him, this was just a practice. First get familiar with the rhythm of this hunting, and then start to move deeper from the outer area. My goal is to hunt down at least aliens with a superpower index of more than 9,200 points, because the further you go, the more difficult it is to improve your superpowers. For example, when Zhangyi's ability index was 9,600 points, killing a fin dragon with 9,200 points would increase his ability index by about 100 points. However, the closer he is to the threshold of 10,000 points, the smaller the improvement will be. This means that he must kill more powerful aliens. Only in this way can he completely reach the realm of Ipsilon. Both Marley and Scylla are small countries, and the aliens they sent are not strong enough. I think the aliens from Hellchain and Neon are more delicious. After all, compared to Marley and Scylla, even Neon can be called a powerful country. Zhangyi reached out and stroked Huahua's head, whispering, "It's time to go deeper into the poisonous miasma area. We have to find some interesting opponents, right?" Huahua squinted. "I want to eat something good too." Zhangyi smiled and said, "Very good, let's go." Lele lay on the ground, sniffing hard with his nose. The breath of creatures flowing in the air, even if it is far away, will be captured by it keenly. "Boss, if we want to go deeper into the poisonous miasma area, we have to go in this direction." Its nose pointed to the left front. Zhangyi raised his hand and opened the dimensional door. A huge circular passage appeared in front of them. "Well, let's go." The latest news from the command center has confirmed that Chaos has eliminated the 2 alien teams of Scylla and Marley. Those killed are Spider Demon and Dangun of Scylla, Hai Lao Gong of Marley. The battle report was synchronized to the ears of every alien present by the command center in real time. This was a suggestion made by Li Tianyang to motivate every combatant on Qingdao. Sure enough, everyone was also encouraged to hear that Zhang Yi had wiped out 2 alien teams in a row within 1 day. That guy really loves to show off. On the side of the demon team, the captain Lu Huang, the little man codenamed Tao Tai, raised the corner of his mouth and revealed his sharp tiger teeth. "We can't let him show off alone. It's time for us to act." Deng Shintong, Li Long, and others were also inspired. Maybe they didn't say anything, but they accelerated their pace. Deng Shintong was moving forward. In this area, the field of vision was greatly limited, but for Deng Shintong, this limitation was minimal. Because he was the embodiment of light. As long as there was light, his eyes could see through everything. If he was not afraid of exposing himself, he could even turn himself into a light source to illuminate the way ahead. As he was moving forward, a pleasant laugh suddenly rang in his ears, echoing in the depths of the thick fog. Everyone immediately became alert. Several team members looked around cautiously, but the laughter echoed around, and it was difficult to determine the direction of the source for a while. "Is it an enemy?" Deng Shintong looked up leisurely. "It seems not." His eyes were like a hawk, penetrating the thick fog, and in the depths of the fog, he saw a very strange existence. They were several pure white creatures with silver-white moonlight on their bodies. They were not even as tall as knees, but they were cute like small crescent moons. The moment he saw them, Deng Shintong's eyes lit up. He felt his DNA moving, and there was an instinctive impulse driving him to get that creature. Could this be the source of God? Deng Shintong was stunned, and this was the first thing he thought of. He originally thought that the source of God should be some kind of ore or energy body, but he didn't expect it to be a living thing? No. He couldn't be sure, but he had to catch the elf and investigate. Deng Shintong didn't have time to call his subordinates. He lowered his body and rushed in that direction like lightning. After a few breaths, Deng Shintong passed through the thick poisonous miasma and came to the place where the group of elves were. They looked at Deng Shintong innocently, and the silver-white moonlight on their bodies was so intoxicating. After seeing Deng Shintong, they didn't run away in fear, but smiled. They ran over and danced happily around Deng Shintong. They made strange but pleasant sounds, as if they were singing some ancient ballads. Deng Shintong did not dare to be careless. He wore silver gloves on his hands, which were attached with supernatural powers. He turned into a shadow and caught a little elf. At this moment, a familiar feeling arose in his heart. It was the feeling of absorbing the origin of aliens. Deng Shintong was extremely excited. Could this be the source of God? He almost did not hesitate and began to devour this power at that time. The elf was slowly devoured in his palm, but there was no expression of panic or anger. It just turned into wisps of pure energy and entered his body peacefully. Deng Shintong was so comfortable that he almost shouted out, "This pure energy is more enjoyable than absorbing the origin of aliens." Just this little elf has increased his supernatural index by at least 50 points, comparable to an alien with a supernatural index of more than 8,000 points. No mistake, this must be the source of God. Deng Shintong looked at the dozen or so elves in front of him, and his eyes showed a hint of heat. He did not choose to report the intelligence to the command center. Instead, he had to devour all the elves in front of him first. In that case, his ability index could soar by hundreds of points. However, the next moment, a huge sense of crisis enveloped him. Those elves sang and danced happily, as if it was some kind of sacrifice and summoning ritual. From the depths of the fog, a huge, white elf walked out. It was as cute as an oversized plush toy, with big eyes that looked very cute and adorable, and elk-like horns on its head. But when it saw Deng Shintong kill an elf, its cute eyes suddenly turned blood red. An extremely fierce and terrifying force instantly erupted from its body, sweeping towards Deng Shintong. Chapter 954. Tapper Elias. The moonlight covered the entire area. An icy blue light burst out from the giant elf's body, and in an instant, all the surrounding areas were covered by a biting cold wind. Deng Shintong was wearing a special combat uniform, but in an instant, his clothes began to freeze. Pop! The silver light blessed by Deng Shintong's holy body flashed, directly shattering the ice. But then, there was an extremely violent ice and snow storm. Deng Shintong's feet were rootless, and he was directly blown hundreds of meters away by the storm mixed with huge ice blocks. I don't know how many dead trees he smashed along the way. So strong. The power of this elf is probably even higher than mine. I can't fight it with force. I must outsmart it. Deng Shintong made a judgment in his heart in an instant. At the same time, he had a strong impulse in his heart. Just absorbing a little elf gave him energy that could increase his supernatural power index by 50 points. If this big one is killed, is it possible to directly advance to the realm of Epsilon? I didn't expect that this time. The luckiest person is me. Deng Shintong smiled. One day after landing on the island, he actually found the thing that made several major countries fight for it. But just when Deng Shintong wanted to chase it, he was shocked to find that the huge elf and more than a dozen elves had disappeared. They disappeared? Deng Shintong stood there blankly. Soon, his subordinates followed him. "Captain, are you okay? What happened just now?" Deng Shintong glanced at Bai Chunyu and said lightly, "Maybe, we have found the source of God." He told the situation to several people. These are the direct descendants cultivated by their Deng family and are trustworthy. After listening, Bai Chunyu said excitedly, "Doesn't that mean that you have a chance to be promoted to the Epsilon realm?" Deng Shintong said, "That thing is very strange and very strong. It is not so easy to capture." He sighed, "If I miss it this time, I don't know when I will meet it next time." But he clenched his fists. his eyes full of desire. But it must not jump far. It is nearby. We must find it out. He has made a judgment in his heart. That weird elf should be some kind of energy body. Although they have terrifying power, they are very lacking in fighting methods and skills. So after repelling Deng Shintong, they immediately chose to escape. In this way, they have a greater hope of catching that guy. Yes, Captain? Bai Chunyu and others received the order and immediately began to disperse and search for traces of the strange creature in the nearby area. Deng Shintong lowered his head and looked at his right hand. He began to miss the feeling of improving his strength. He was almost reaching his limit, and now every step forward was extremely difficult. And here, he found an opportunity to break through. Will that lucky person be me? No, that person must be me. He clenched his fists and said with a firm look. The God Squad began to search for clues around the mysterious creature. A member of the God Squad stepped into the fog and found some footprints on the snow, like those left by the elves. In the thick fog, a hard shell slowly poked its head out. It was a hideous and terrifying monster, covered with a dark blue shell, and the dark luster was as sharp as a knife. Its long mouth opened, a puff of white smoke came out, and green saliva flowed down its jaw. Huh? The survey team member realized the danger and stopped moving forward. The next moment, two huge sickles stretched out from the poisonous miasma and swept towards his head. The survey team member's pupils shrank, and his body quickly retreated. At the same time, he opened his mouth and spit out a large web condensed from spider silk, which covered him head-on. Swish! 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 The white spider web was torn apart in an instant, and the monster revealed its true form. It turned out to be a giant mantis that was more than 3 meters tall. However, judging from the combat uniform covering him, he was an orc-type, insect-type alien. Enemy found. The survey team member informed everyone of this in the communicator, and then his cheeks bulged high, and a large ball of white mucus gushed towards the opponent. The knife-carrying mantis vibrated its wings and rushed over at high speed in the air, but it could not avoid this large area of mucus, and many joints were stuck. The investigator opened his mouth, his jaw split open, revealing a huge and ferocious mouthparts and huge fangs, and bit the mantis. The mantis widened its eyes and tried its best to break free, but the white mucus was more difficult to deal with than glue. His sickle could cut through steel, but it had no effect on the mucus on his joints, and he couldn't dodge for a while. It was about to be swallowed by the investigator's mouthparts. At this moment, the poisonous miasma was suddenly dispelled, and a sturdy arm more than 10 meters long grabbed over here. The investigator was caught off guard, like a bug being caught by a huge arm. The arm just exerted a little force, and the bones and internal organs of the investigation team members were directly broken. Puff. He spat out a large mouthful of blood mixed with internal organs, and his eyes gradually dimmed. The arm slowly retracted, and several people walked out of the thick fog. The leader had chestnut curly hair, a mustache above his lips, and a deep and gorgeous combat uniform. When Mantis saw the man, he knelt down hurriedly. Dotto, your subordinates. Your subordinates are incompetent, and you have to do it yourself. Please punish me. This team of aliens came from Marley, and the one who appeared here was Marley's strongest man, Taper Elias. He glanced at the mantis coldly, pointed at him, and said, "Don't underestimate your opponent. The strength of the aliens in Huashu is not weak." He put his hands behind his back. "Even if you are my Taper Elias's subordinates, don't be arrogant." Deep in the poisonous miasma, a silver light broke through the thick fog and came to the battlefield in an instant. Deng Shintong saw the twisted and deformed body on the ground, and his narrow peach blossom eyes turned cold. He looked at the alien opposite him, Jiangnan region, the captain of the god team, Erlang Xianqing. "Who is this, sir?" Tapper raised his mouth, and his handsome mustache jumped, always giving people a sense of playfulness. "You ask me? Well, you listen carefully." He stood proudly with his hands behind his back and said with an extremely proud attitude, "I am the #1 master, the #1 collector, and the #1 noble in Marley. The immortal star of Anasai City, the most wise genius of the Elias family in 100 years. Now, I am even more of a god in Marley. The pride of the Elias family, Tapper Elias. Tapper reported a series of his names. He does not have the code names that ordinary aliens have. Because in Marley, as long as the strong are mentioned, everyone will mention his name. Tapper Elias. This name itself represents supreme glory. Chapter 955 Giant God Dodogong. Elias stretched out a finger and pointed at Deng Shintong. You are honored to meet me, but your life will also end here, unless you are willing to submit to me. Deng Shintong showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth. A mere Marleyan is not qualified to be so arrogant in front of me. Before he finished speaking, a terrifying gust of wind hit Elias' head. Elias glanced to the side and heard a loud boom. The huge impact produced a radial airflow, dispersing all the poisonous miasma within a few miles around. However, after the poisonous miasma rolled back, it was soon squeezed back. What? Elias used his arms to protect his head in time, but his body was still blown away hundreds of meters by the powerful impact. He didn't know what he was hit by just now. In the void, Deng Shintong's figure slowly emerged. But the Deng Shintong who had just stood there slowly dissipated. Eyes can deceive others. Deng Shintong muttered in his heart. The ability of Praise of Light allows him to have the power to control light and can also create illusions in people's eyes. Now he has grown up and is no longer the gentleman who pursues splendor and nobility. He is just a warrior who pursues victory to gain honor. From the moment he appeared in this area, all the aliens in Marley saw illusions. Clang! The long flower sword was pulled out from Deng Shintong's waist. His figure suddenly disappeared from the spot, and then Elias saw a string of blood flowers splashing in the air. In an instant, all 5 of his men were pierced through the heart by Deng Shintong. The narrow flower sword only left a bright red plum blossom on their chests, making their deaths so sad and beautiful. Elias's face darkened instantly. War without declaration is the practice of despicable mobs. You are really not elegant at all. In response to him, there was a sword in the back. All I want is victory. Only the winner is qualified to end the battle in a gorgeous manner. Deng Shintong's sword pierced Elias's combat uniform and was about to pierce his heart. At this moment, something strange happened. Elias' body suddenly began to release hot air, like a jet fighter, directly blowing Deng Shintong away. Deng Shintong struggled to insert his sword into the wall of a ruin in the air, and then hung on the wall to stabilize his body. Elias's explosion did not stop, and the surging heat swept indiscriminately in all directions, blowing away everyone around. As the thick steam slowly dissipated, a huge figure slowly stood up. It was a behemoth with a height of more than 30 meters, covered with brown hard armor. When he stood up straight, the surrounding high-rise buildings seemed dwarfed. This is the ability of Tapper Elias, Giant God Dodogong. Deng Shintong frowned slightly, and he felt the terrifying power contained in this body. Elias turned his head and looked at Deng Shintong. Mortal, you are trying to kill the gods. This is a capital crime. As soon as the voice fell, his huge arm turned into a residual image and pulled towards Deng Shintong's position. Boom! The huge high-rise building was directly cut in half, and half of the floor collapsed. Deng Shintong's figure had disappeared on the spot. You can be invisible? Haha, blind arrogance. Elias's huge ears moved. He has a huge body and unparalleled physical strength. As a result, his cell activity is far beyond that of ordinary people, and naturally, he has obtained extraordinary 5 senses. He suddenly punched the ground hard, directly shattering the earth, and his right hand sank into the ground like a mud. Then, he took out a green scepter more than 10 meters long from the depths of the earth. Deng Shintong suddenly jumped into the air. Facing such a huge monster, ordinary attacks would not work at all. You must find a way to attack his vital points, for example, the heart or the head. But the attack method must be effective, Otherwise, a sword piercing his body may not even penetrate the muscles. His left hand pulled out a narrow silver pistol with elegant violet patterns on it.
Bang!
An origin bullet shot into Elias' eyes. The huge body, however, reacted at an unimaginable speed and swung out a blow, the green scepter knocking the bullet away. Deng Shintong's figure turned into an afterimage, constantly moving around Elias at a high speed, and the bullets in his hand kept shooting at Elias. Even though the huge body had a high-speed reaction, its reaction speed in such a small area was not as fast as Deng Shintong's. Crack. There was a chaotic sound, like firecrackers exploding on his body, and sparks appeared all over Elias' body. But this attack could not break his hard shell at all. You have no idea about God. Your attack is ineffective against me. Elias raised the scepter in his hand high and then smashed it down hard on Deng Shintong's head. Deng Shintong was surrounded by a flash of silver light, and he dodged the attack with an agile roll. But at this moment, a thunderous noise came from behind him. The earth was directly torn open, and broken buildings and earth and rocks flew everywhere. A building in front of him collapsed because of the broken ground. Deng Shintong's pupils shrank slightly. If he hit it hard, even he would lose half his life. The terrifying power of Elias in front of him was too amazing. My ability index is only 9,400 points, and he has at least 9,500. Deng Shintong made a judgment based on his experience in an instant. He knew that he had encountered an extremely difficult opponent this time. He could dodge the opponent's attack countless times, but as long as he was hit once, the battle could basically be declared over. Therefore, he had to be extremely careful. Deng Shintong stopped on the ground, and Elias's eyes turned over in an instant. Although the light was distorted and Deng Shintong's face was not clear, he was still able to determine Deng Shintong's position with his excellent five senses. Is it here?
Bug.
Another sweep, plainly sweeping towards the area where Deng Shintong was. With his huge arm span and the blessing of the scepter, this attack directly covered a fan-shaped area with a radius of nearly 30 meters. Deng Shintong retreated again and again, and his eyes met Elias. Great Shumi illusion. His body burst into a burst of sharp white light, like a sun appearing in front of Elias. The giant couldn't help but squint his eyes. He used his hand to cover the light in front of his eyes, but when he opened his eyes again, the whole world in front of him suddenly changed. This is no longer the Star Island shrouded in poisonous miasma, but his hometown, the huge manor of the Elias family. His family was having afternoon tea on the green lawn, and his beautiful wife was wearing a purple dress, elegant and beautiful. His son was smart and cute and was sharing interesting things about school with his wife. The servants around them were looking at them with smiles, serving them with teapots and snacks. Not far away came the click and click sounds of the gardener pruning branches. Illusion. Elias thought of this at the first time. But this illusion was too real, so that he could clearly hear his wife's laughter and the click of the iron shears. Chapter 956. My family is pretty rich. Elias knew that everything in front of him was an illusion, but they were too real. At this moment, his wife suddenly looked at him. Then a bright smile appeared on her face. She picked up her long skirt and ran towards him. A mocking smile appeared on the corner of Elias's mouth. You want to use this cheap trick against me? Stupid. He swung the scepter in his hand and directly wiped out his wife. But the illusion in front of him did not disappear. He could even clearly see the miserable state of his wife's bloody corpse. Screams rang out around him instantly.
Dotto.
What are you doing? Father, you actually killed my mother. The screams were endless. Even though Elias knew that these were all fake, as a human with emotions, he could not be completely indifferent to this illusion that was too real. At this time, a long sword quietly appeared behind his head. Blessing of the holy body. Deng Shintong's body surface, a sacred and brilliant silver light enveloped his whole body. The purest light represents powerful power. The silver light extended to his sword Griffith and stabbed Elias's back of the head fiercely. Crack. A crisp cracking sound rang out, and Elias's body bones, like a thick metal shell, shattered. But this blow also made Elias react quickly. Before the sword tip pierced through the outer shell and entered the brain, Elias slapped Deng Shintong fiercely with a backhand. It was a slap that was heavier and bigger than the gate of the Deng family courtyard. Deng Shintong's sword tip was stuck in his surface shell, and the brief pause when he pulled it out made it too late for him to dodge this palm. Puff! Deng Shintong was slapped and flew out directly, passing through thousands of meters of ruins and jungles like a cannonball. He struggled to stabilize his body in midair, holding the sword in his right hand to support the ground. A wisp of blood slowly overflowed from the corner of his mouth. The sword just now did not kill Elias, but instead caused him to suffer a serious injury. I underestimated his defense. Although the Great Shumi environment can create illusions and affect Elias's 5 senses. But the pain in the body is real, which will allow Elias to find his position instantly. The most difficult thing is to break the layer of bone shell on his body that is comparable to armor. Elias did not chase him. He was still immersed in the illusion. As long as Deng Shintong does not take the initiative to remove the Great Shumi illusion, he will never be able to get rid of this situation. Elias stood there, stagnant like a dead machine. He knew that he had to find a way to break this illusion. Otherwise, he could only be in a passive situation. Think about how I got hit. Yes, it's light. I saw his light. Then, if I close my eyes, will it be okay? Anyway, everything in front of him is an illusion, and his eyes have lost their function. Therefore, Elias chose to close his eyes and isolate himself from the light of this world. When everything in front of him turned dark, all the noisy sounds around him disappeared. A smile of ecstasy appeared on his lips. Hey, that's all. On the other side, Deng Shintong's new round of attack also arrived. He took out 2 silver balls from under his robe and threw them at Elias' feet. A moment later, an amazing explosion broke out at Elias' feet. Elias's painful groan came from the scene, and the hard shell of his legs actually broke, and a large amount of blood flowed like a spring. What kind of weapon is this? It can actually hurt my body. Elias shouted in disbelief. This is a special explosive bomb specially used to deal with high-level aliens like you. 2 more silver balls appeared in Deng Shintong's palm. The power of each of them is comparable to a tomahawk missile. But it's a pity. Its cost is too high, and the materials required are extremely difficult to obtain. The most important thing is that Deng Shintong is not Jangi, and he has no conditions to carry a large number of them. Otherwise, with the strength of the Deng family, not to mention too many, it would be no problem for him to carry 300 or 500 at a time. I don't have any special talents, but my family is relatively rich. Deng Shintong couldn't help but sigh. In the past, he was unwilling to admit that his strength came from his family. He felt that he was born strong and could reach the top even without relying on the power of the Deng family. Therefore, when he was performing tasks, he would try his best to avoid using the products of Deng's technology. Now he has figured it out. As long as he can win, he can use everything he has. Winning is everything. Elias sneered. You are richer than me? I own the entire Marley country. Deng Shintong glanced at him coldly. How can a small country talk about wealth? The wealth I mean is the foundation of science and technology, not just money. Although Elias's legs were injured, the scars looked terrible and bleeding. But compared with his huge body, this injury was not a big problem. Very good. This time, I will be on guard. He clenched the scepter in his hand and pricked up his ears to listen carefully to the sound. His superior 5 senses allowed him to judge the weapons attacking from the surroundings even with his eyes closed. Deng Shintong's body moved around him at a high speed, and it turned into a circular silver vortex. He seized the opportunity, swung his wide cloak, and dozens of silver bombs shot towards Elias in an instant. Only one of these bombs is real. Guess which one it is. Elias's movements were slow for a moment. Deng Shintong's words gave him a psychological hint. If every bomb was real, he would definitely fight back all of them. But if most of them were fake, then it would be meaningless to fight back the fake ones. However, Deng Shintong might also be lying. These dozens of silver balls could all be bombs that could hurt him. After a brief moment, Elias made a judgment. Since it was not clear which one was real, just fight them all back. He let out a roar and held the green scepter with both hands. His huge arms were so fast that after images appeared, ping pong pong. Like playing baseball, he fought back the bombs that attacked him one by one.
Boom.
A violent explosion sounded, and a real bomb exploded the moment it touched the scepter. Among the bombs thrown by Deng Shintong, only one was real. And he was not in a hurry because he knew that it was completely unrealistic to want to kill Elias simply by relying on bombs. He was just creating opportunities and then discovering Elias' weaknesses. Chapter 957. Gentleman's Showdown. Closing his eyes really has an impact on his actions. Even if he has extraordinary five senses and can determine my position, even a small bomb can be accurately rebounded. But he dare not open his eyes, so he probably relies on hearing. Deng Shintong's left hand gently pressed on the combat suit on his right arm, and the outer shell of the combat suit opened. And 6 micro-robots flew out from it. In the Ice Age, high-power energy-consuming robots have gradually been eliminated on the battlefield, but this kind of gadgets that rely on micro-batteries can still play a role. Deng Shintong quickly gave them instructions. The 6 micro-robots flew to the 6 directions around Elias. Now, starts. Deng Shintong issued an order. The next moment, these 6 micro-robots actually made a deafening sound. The sharp sound pierced the ears like a needle. Deng Shintong used the principle of sound wave cancellation in advance and used sound waves of opposite phases to cancel out this noise. But for Elias, this sudden noise instantly plunged him into great pain. His brain felt like it was pierced by 10,000 steel needles, and he immediately covered his ears in pain. However, this sharp sound wave would still penetrate into his ears and irritate his eardrums even if he covered his ears. You can't see, you can't hear. What can you do to fight back now? Deng Shintong rushed towards Elias, with a sword in hand. This time, his target was Elias' left foot, whose outer shell had been blown apart. Puff! The long sword cut a huge hole, and blood gushed out like a waterfall. Elias's left foot tendon was directly cut off. He wailed in pain, and because his left foot could not support his body, he fell to his knees on the ground. After Deng Shintong rushed forward and stopped his steps, he planned to repeat the same trick and cut off Elias's other foot. Damn bug! Die! At this moment, Elias let out a painful roar, and his body began to swell rapidly, and hot white steam emanated from all parts of his body. For some reason, Deng Shintong suddenly felt uneasy. It was a threat, close to death. He immediately stopped his forward steps, and without hesitation, he retreated quickly to the back. As he expected, the body of the giant god Gong, who was incarnated by Elias, suddenly began to expand violently, and white steam rushed up into the sky like a heat wave. In a short moment, it was like a huge bomb that began to explode. The killer of the giant god form, human nuclear weapon. The power of the incarnation of the giant god Gong will be released at once, which will cause a violent explosion with an explosion range of 2 kilometers. The surging heat wave swept in all directions, and all the surrounding buildings and dead trees were swept clean. The thick snow on the ground melted and then evaporated. Deng Shintong was very alert and ran away at the first time, but he was still swept by the shock wave of the explosion and was hit hard. He felt a burst of heat on his back, and a big hole was burned in his combat uniform. Fortunately, he was protected by the blessing of the holy body, so he was not seriously injured. But his throat was fishy and sweet, and he couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. His chest was aching. If I was in the core area of the explosion just now, I might be dead now. Deng Shintong thought with lingering fear. The battle between high-level aliens is so dangerous that one can lose his life if he is not careful. In the area outside the battlefield, the aliens of the two teams were also fighting fiercely. But the movement here made them feel heartbroken. The battle above the captain level is no longer a dimension for them, and they're not qualified to intervene at all. At this time, both sides can only pray for their captains and can no longer provide other help. Deng Shintong slowly stood up, took out a healing medicine from his pocket, and put it in his mouth. As for the compound, he didn't plan to use it for the time being. Unless he had to, he didn't want to use the kind of thing that overdraft his body. Because at this time, overdrafting strength is equivalent to automatically withdrawing from the competition for the source of God. He was unwilling to hand over this overwhelming wealth to others. This battlefield has been completely cleared, and the poisonous miasma has also surged far away, and it is impossible to get close for a short time. Elias regained his human form, holding a green scepter, and walked towards Deng Shintong step by step. His combat suit had turned off the visual system and turned on the active noise reduction function. Deng Shintong could not use the same trick a second time. However, Deng Shintong also made a judgment. He could not use such a skill that consumed a lot of energy a second time in a short period of time. You are indeed quite powerful, but now I have figured out your ability. After Elias said this, he stretched out his hand and pulled out a sharp sword from the green scepter. It was a Western sword, and the tip of the sword pointing directly at Deng Shintong's head. Next, let's have a gentleman's duel. The two of them have almost used up their trump cards in the life and death fight. So next, it's a real head-on battle. Deng Shintong wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and posed a classic fencing posture. Okay, let's fight.
As
Soon as the voice fell, the two figures disappeared at the same time and rushed to the opposite side. Fencing is very dangerous. It is a weapon that mainly pierces. However, unlike fencing in sports, its side is also bladed. So in addition to having a strong piercing ability, you can also use the side blade to cut a hole in the enemy's body. When the sword is out, the sword tip will not leave the enemy's center line, causing a huge sense of oppression. As long as you make a mistake, it will pierce your heart fiercely. The sound of the sword tip colliding is like raindrops falling on rocks when it rains, crackling and endless. Both of them regard themselves as aristocrats. They are both good at fencing since childhood, and they both have strong melee strength. Therefore, the battle was extremely intense, and soon both of them had obvious bloodstains on their bodies. Puff! Elias found an opportunity and pierced Deng Shintong's lower abdomen with a sword. Deng Shintong also took the opportunity to pierce his shoulder holding the sword. Injury for injury, no one will have a good time. The two men separated while enduring the severe pain, and the first thing they did was to take out the hemostatic drugs and start healing. Otherwise, at this temperature, they would quickly lose their combat effectiveness due to frostbite. Just when the two were fighting desperately, their strength was almost consumed, and they were also seriously injured. A bullet shot from the depths of the poisonous miasma and pierced Elias's head. Chapter 958. Watch your back. When Elias fell, his eyes were still filled with astonishment and confusion. He didn't know why the world in front of him suddenly went dark. Deng Shintong was also confused. His nerves were tense at the first moment, and he was about to escape. At this moment, he heard a familiar voice. You guys are really risking your lives by making such a big noise. A circular passage appeared in the air, and Jangi appeared in front of Deng Shintong with Hua and Lele. He carried a huge silver-gray sniper rifle on his shoulder and looked at Elias' body on the ground with a smile on his face. Zhang Yi. Seeing that it was Zhang Yi, Deng Shintong's body relaxed instantly. Zhang Yi stretched out his hand and made a silent gesture. I've told you so many times that you should call by code name when you work. Zhang Yi didn't just get here. He appeared a few minutes ago. It's just that he was waiting for Deng Shintong to consume Elias to the extreme, and at that time, Elias's attention would be distracted. Only in this way can Zhang Yi succeed in one shot. Thank you. Deng Shintong suddenly covered his chest, and the blood at the corner of his mouth increased. If Zhang Yi hadn't arrived just in time, it would be hard to say who would survive between him and Elias. Don't be polite to me. I won't be polite to you anyway. Zhang Yi picked up Elias's body and said to Deng Shintong, the credit belongs to you, and his origin belongs to me. You have no objection, right? What objection could Deng Shintong have? Zhang Yi saved his life. That's fair, Deng Shintong said with a smile. Zhang Yi had planned to leave, but looking at Deng Shintong's serious injury, he frowned slightly. If Deng Shintong was left here, someone might take advantage of the opportunity and kill him. He had a good relationship with the Deng family, and there was no reason to watch him get into trouble here. I'll send you back for treatment first. Come back after you recover from your injury. Although his injury looked serious, as long as it was not a terminal illness, this kind of physical injury could be healed quickly. At most, Deng Shintong would be back in a day or two. Deng Shintong looked at Zhang Yi gratefully and said with a bright smile, "Thank you. But before that, let's clean up the battlefield first." Zhang Yi's eyes swept around. The battle in this battlefield has ended, but the battles of other team members have not yet ended. This is why I don't want to bring Bailey and others here. Zhang Yi sighed. The cruelty of this battlefield is beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Even if a captain comes here, there is a risk of death, not to mention ordinary team members. They appear here and can only play an auxiliary role in assisting reconnaissance, and it is almost difficult to intervene in battles above the captain level. Deng Shintong said helplessly, "Maybe. No one thought that the aliens from Colombia and other countries would appear." Zhang Yi said lightly, "Yes, who knows? I'll go clean up the battlefield first." As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared from the spot in an instant, leaving Huahua and Lele to protect Deng Shintong. A minute later, the team of Taper Elias, the strongest man in Marley, was completely wiped out. Zhang Yi came back to find Deng Shintong and said to him, "I can only take you back, the others have to stay here first." Deng Shintong thought about it and called Bai Chunyu. "Old Bai, you take everyone and hide nearby first. Don't act rashly before I come back. Don't get into conflict with others." Bai Chunyu nodded. After this battle, they also realized the cruelty of the island. Zhang Yi asked, "Do you want them to die so much?" Deng Shintong and Bai Chunyu looked at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi said lightly, "I was attracted by the noise of your battle. Although I can't be sure that there must be aliens from the joint forces nearby, what if there are people?" Deng Shintong was silent for a moment. Zhang Yi just came here and didn't know that he had discovered the mysterious creature. But now he is injured and can't continue to perform the mission. So he ordered Bai Chunyu to take people back to a shopping mall where they came before. After the arrangements were completed here, Zhang Yi asked Lele to carry Deng Shintong, then opened the door to the other dimension and began to travel through space. Although it was impossible to determine the direction, Zhang Yi had already used his own method to make coordinates along the way when he came here, so he just had to return along the original route. Deng Shintong looked at Zhang Yi and couldn't help but sighed. Space-related aliens are really convenient. I wish I could have let you join the God team back then. Zhang Yi glanced at him and asked with a smile, "Then you'll be my deputy captain?" Deng Shintong raised his eyebrows. "Double captains. You are the captain and I am also the captain, so there is no need for us to fight." Zhang Yi sneered. "We can talk about it after we go back. By the way, next time I have time, I will take you to Tianhai City to fish." The two joked. Zhang Yi led Deng Shintong back all the way. Deng Shintong suddenly said to Zhang Yi, "Handan, wait a minute. I have something very important to talk to you about." Zhang Yi stopped. "Oh, what is it? More important than your life?" Deng Shintong smiled and shook his head. "I won't die from this injury. Also, don't think that I'm so delicate just because I'm the 6th generation of the rich." Zhang Yi nodded. "Very good. What you said makes me want to beat you up." Deng Shintong coughed, and he looked around cautiously, but this move was completely instinctive. With Zhang Yi, Huahua, and Lele around, it was almost impossible for anyone nearby to ambush. "We're about to return to the Xuanwu. I originally planned to keep this matter a secret and eat it all by myself. But now I'm injured, and it will be discovered sooner or later. So I might as well tell you, as a way to repay your kindness in saving me." Zhang Yi looked at him. "What is it?" "The source of God," Deng Shintong said leisurely. Zhang Yi met his gaze, and Zhang Yi could feel that Deng Shintong was not joking. Zhang Yi said calmly, "You must have seen it wrong. The source of God is in the Fog Valley." Deng Shintong shook his head. "No, that must be it. The source of God is not a dead thing. but a living thing. He told Zhang Yi how he met that kind of elf, and how his ability improved rapidly after absorbing it. However, Zhang Yi just smiled faintly after hearing it. I can tell you very sure that it is not the source of God. However, it should also be a magical existence, and it may be a companion of the source of God. Zhang Yi said. He has touched the fragments of the source of God, and knows this better than anyone here. Deng Shintong looked at Zhang Yi in surprise. Why do you say that? Zhang Yi said calmly, because the ability of the source of God can allow people to break through the limitations of genes. If it is just pure energy, then killing a captain-level alien can get more. Chapter 959. Jealous Dog. Zhang Yi's words calmed Deng Shintong's fiery heart. However, he immediately thought of the large elf, and after thinking about it, he did not tell Zhang Yi. If according to Zhang Yi, the small elf is just an energy body, then what about the big one? Maybe that is the real source of God. Deng Shintong also had selfish thoughts, and he kept this matter in his heart. Anyway, thank you for sharing the information. I will pay attention to it. Zhang Yi said to Deng Shintong with a smile. Deng Shintong felt a little guilty, but people are selfish. His talent is not as high as Zhang Yi, and he must consider himself. He wants to become stronger and doesn't want to be anyone's foil anymore. Not long after, the two left Qingdao. Zhang Yi took Deng Shintong all the way back to Xuanwu. Their return surprised everyone on Xuanwu. Because today is only the first day, Deng Shintong came back with injuries all over his body. After seeing this, several officers from the East China Sea region couldn't help but laugh jokingly. The captain of the Jiangnan region has withdrawn from the battlefield so soon? Fortunately, he saved his life. The Yanyan guards from the Jiangnan region nearby hurried over to respond. Hearing this, they couldn't help but show anger in their eyes. But Deng Shintong was indeed seriously injured, and they didn't know how to refute. Zhang Yi glanced at the members of the Sea Dragon Force who were making sarcastic remarks, and said lightly, Yes, we just killed 3 alien teams of the joint forces, and wiped them out. I don't know how your East China region is doing now. Several officers of the East China Sea Dragon Force suddenly changed their faces. This kind of thing can be figured out with a check, and with the identities of Zhang Yi and Deng Shintong, it is impossible for them to lie about this matter. Their expressions were very embarrassed, and they had to cough to cover it up for a while. Zhang Yi didn't bother to pay attention to them at all, and asked someone to send Deng Shintong to the treatment cabin for treatment. When they learned that Zhang Yi and Deng Shintong had returned, Li Tianyang, Sito Xian, and others also came. They could not grasp the situation on the island in real time. After the various alien forces landed on the island, they all acted separately. Since everyone had their minds set on the source of the gods, they would not synchronize the situation on the battlefield in real time. Only when encountering special events would they communicate with the command center. Chaos, Erling Shin. How come you are back so soon? Li Tianyang asked with his hands behind his back and frowned. Zhang Yi glanced at him. Erling Shen alone annihilated an alien force from Marley. The other party claimed to be the strongest in Marley. His name was what? The name is too long, it's really hard to remember. Deng Shintong smiled and said, Taper Elias. The faces of Li Tianyang and others changed immediately. Elias? Of course they had heard of the reputation of the alien from Marley. Li Tianyang couldn't help but look at the seriously injured Deng Shintong. Did you kill Elias? No, Chaos and I killed him together. Deng Shintong said generously. Zhang Yi looked at him in surprise. Didn't the two of them agree that the source would belong to Zhang Yi and the credit would belong to Deng Shintong? Deng Shintong smiled and looked at him. I have gotten too much fame in my life. It's not important to me. Zhang Yi smiled helplessly. That's true. As the son of the Deng family, he didn't care about the mission points. Li Tianyang stared at Zhang Yi, his eyes sharp as a shark staring at its prey. Zhang Yi also narrowed his eyes slowly. This Li Tianyang has always been at odds with him. It seems that after hearing about his achievements, he began to feel unhappy. But Zhang Yi didn't care about him at all. Even though the East China Sea region was the leader of this operation, it didn't mean that the Jiangnan region could be manipulated by anyone. What's more, Li Tianyang was just a combat chief, not a regional commander. I want to receive a batch of new equipment. Please help me prepare it. Especially large-yield explosives and weapons, as well as food and fresh water. Zhang Yi said to Situ Xian. Situ Xian nodded. Okay, no problem. As much as you want. Situ Xian's face was almost crooked with laughter. Zhang Yi's performance today can be regarded as a great victory for the Jiangnan region. Let the people of the East China Sea region see if their Jiangnan region is too weak. Wait a minute. Just as Zhang Yi was about to leave with the person in charge of military supplies, Li Tianyang suddenly stopped him. Zhang Yi glanced at him coldly. What's the matter? Li Tianyang asked in a deep voice. How can you act on your own on the battlefield? Why don't you follow my orders and actively advance towards the Fog Valley? Instead, you fight guerrilla warfare on the edge of the battlefield and disturb the enemy. This will affect the entire battle situation. He raised his chin and snorted coldly. Is it impressive to destroy a few small fish troops? Why don't I see you go and fight with Columbia's hull chain? Don't forget what the biggest purpose of our trip is. It's not for you to show off your personal power, but to obtain the source of God. Zhang Yi listened to Li Tianyang and said. After saying this, Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes slowly. This bastard actually abused his power for personal gain and came here to criticize and teach him a lesson. Zhang Yi glanced at Xuanwu behind him. Although Xuanwu had been playing video games with his head down, Zhang Yi had no way to deal with Li Tianyang with him around. He could only sneer and look at Li Tianyang with disdain. When do we have to report to you when we take action on the island? Li Tianyang didn't expect Zhang Yi to dare to refute him.
He
Immediately shouted loudly. How dare you? I am the commander-in-chief of this operation. You must obey all my orders on the battlefield. Otherwise, it is a violation of military orders. Situ Xian walked up to Li Tianyang with a smile and put his hand on his shoulder. Minister Li, calm down. As the saying goes, a general is not subject to the orders of the king when he is away. The situation on Qingdao is complicated, and some situations need to be dealt with randomly. There are many environmental reasons why chaos did this. Deep in Zhang Yi's eyes, a hint of murderous intent flashed. Although Li Tianyang's attitude was very annoying, Zhang Yi would not be stupid enough to take action against him here. Perhaps Li Tianyang wanted to provoke him on purpose, and then force Zhang Yi to take action. At that time, with Xuanwu here, he could be taken down naturally. Then, he would be imprisoned in Xuanwu's body in the name of disobeying military orders. In this way, Zhang Yi would not be able to participate in the fight for the source of God. After figuring it out, Zhang Yi regained his calm expression. But he would remember this matter in his heart. Xuanwu found that the murderous intent on Zhang Yi disappeared and showed him a bright smile. This made Zhang Yi's heart tighten. It seems that he is ready to take action against me. Although Xuanwu is in the form of a spirit at this time, he is the absolute ruler in his body. Zhang Yi is not clear about his methods, and he will not be stupid enough to make things difficult for him. Chapter 960 The Pursuer. Situ Xian spoke up for Zhang Yi and said some polite words. Li Tianyang actually had no way to deal with Zhang Yi. After landing on the island, everyone acted on their own, which was a rule that everyone knew. After all, everyone has their own ideas and wants to get the source of God. Who would listen to Li Tianyang, the nominal commander-in-chief? He just took advantage of the topic to deliberately anger Zhang Yi. Li Tianyang pointed at Zhang Yi, frowned, and said sternly, if you do this, it will only waste our strength. So next, you must take more active actions. Zhang Yi smiled slightly and nodded. Okay, I will do this. Zhang Yi's cooperative attitude made Li Tianyang a little unhappy, and the plan to anger Zhang Yi did not come true. Zhang Yi followed the quartermaster and left, receiving a large number of weapons, ammunition, food, and fresh water. In addition to the standard quota, he also spent all his points and received more supplies. Although he only destroyed 2 teams and then shared the points for destroying Elias's team with Deng Shintong, the supplies he exchanged were enough for several containers. The original rule was to collect the supplies after the war, so how could Zhang Yi take them on the spot? Everyone in the quartermaster's office was dumbfounded. Zhang Yi ignored them. In fact, he didn't need these things, but it would be a waste not to take them. Anyway, he came here. He couldn't return empty-handed. He was used to it. But thinking of Li Tianyang's attitude, the smile in Zhang Yi's eyes began to turn cold. This guy is probably afraid that I will snatch the source of God from them. I guess he will continue to target me next. But it doesn't matter. I won't come back until my goal is achieved. If it wasn't for sending Deng Shintong, he wouldn't have needed to come back here. But he didn't expect that after returning, he would have to endure Li Tianyang's anger. So after Zhang Yi took the supplies, he planned to leave without stopping for a moment and return to Qingdao. Situ Xian came over. Captain Chaos, you've done a great job here. I've already reported the situation to the regional headquarters, and Zhu Shuai is very satisfied with your performance. Zhang Yi looked at Situ Xian's always smiling face and said with a smile, tell Zhu Shuai that I will continue to work hard. I will try to bring the source of God back to the Jiangnan region. Situ Xian smiled and nodded. I'll convey it to you. Zhang Yi left Xuanwu, took Huahua and Lele back to Qingdao, and continued his hunting. Li Tianyang watched Zhang Yi leave, his eyes becoming more and more gloomy. Will he really become a variable? Li Tianyang whispered. Beside him stood the officers of the East China Sea region. Xuanwu held a game console in his hand, wearing headphones on his head, and said absent-mindedly, it may not be a good thing. People with the potential of Ypsilon may not be able to become Ypsilon. The closer you are to the boundary, the harder it is to improve. Everyone looked at Xuanwu, not understanding what he meant. Xuanwu raised his eyelids. The so-called supernatural power points are just artificial boundaries, which are actually dispensable. But the barrier between Delta and Ypsilon is real. The further he goes, the stronger the origin he needs to absorb to break through. If he breaks through the barrier, the world will be vast, but the difficulty is to break through this barrier. At this point, he smiled meaningfully. If he reaches more than 9,900 points, he must kill at least 2 or more supernatural beings of the same level before he can break through. How can this be so simple? Li Tianyang heard this and suddenly thought of some legends about Xuanwu, and his expression suddenly relaxed a little. That's right. If Ypsilon breaks through so easily, you won't be the only one in my East China Sea region who has reached this level. Zhang Yi returned to Qingdao and went deeper into Qingdao in the direction he had been traveling before. The death of Elias finally made the Columbia Navy unable to sit still. The 2 alien teams sent by Marley were all annihilated within one day. Horn's face was a little solemn. This is not accidental, but someone is deliberately hunting them. But what is the meaning of doing this? Those are allies of the Columbia Navy, but allies exist because of interests. So their demise is not a loss to the Columbia Navy. As long as they can get the source of God, it doesn't matter how much such a team loses. After all, an Ypsilon-level alien is worth more than all the alien troops on the entire Star Island. His subordinate, Lieutenant Colonel Critty, pondered for a long time and suddenly seemed to think of something and said, is there another possibility? The other party's goal is to target these high-level aliens. Horn glanced at him. What do you mean by this? Critty responded, there is only one source of God, and not everyone has the opportunity to get it. Our Navy is naturally eager to get it, but our allies dare not hide it secretly even if they get the source of God. Then, can I say that in fact, the island is big? Most of the aliens don't have the chance to get the source of God. Naturally, some smart ones will give up competing for the source of God and hunt aliens to obtain the source. Horn nodded. If this is the case, then the existence of such people will be much less threatening to our mission. But we can't let him continue to kill. Any unexpected existence must be eliminated. Critty said, Hermit Boone has gone to hunt him down, and he won't live long. Zhang Yi returned to the island with Huahua and Lele. He remembered what Deng Shintong had said before, and after thinking about it in his heart, he had sorted out the context of the matter. It seems that his encounter with Saavedra was not accidental. The magical creature he mentioned should be the fuse. Both sides may have discovered the existence of that thing at the same time, and then there was a fight. Otherwise, It may not be a life-and-death struggle. Zhang Yi was near the battlefield at this time. He touched Leilei's head. Its dog nose was very useful. Deng Shintong has concealed something from me. You smell carefully around here to see if there is any suspicious smell. Leilei lowered his head, opened his nostrils, and sniffed hard. Soon, he raised his head and said to Zhang Yi, "This place has been destroyed too badly. I did smell a special smell in the air, but the smell is too weak to determine its location." Zhang Yi judged his current location. It should be deep in Jinfeng City, or on the edge of Badawa City. Judging from the map, it is far away from the Fog Valley. That is a very interesting thing, but it may not be the source of God. However, if we have time, we can track it down by the way.
Zhang Yi said lightly.
But they were not in a hurry to take the next step.
They
have been busy for a long time today. Zhang Yi plans to find a place to have a good rest before taking action. Please subscribe if not already. We will keep posting.
Thanks.